Well, I am just a huge proponent of women and girls' participation in sport, obviously because of the impact it's had on my life, and certainly want to advocate in every way I can for more and more opportunities and better opportunities for girls and women in sports, because it has such a significant impact on their lives and really transforms them in ways that very few other things can do.
Welcome into the Sic Em Podcast. I'm your host, John Morris. From growing up in Oklahoma to playing collegiate basketball to now the president of Baylor University, sports has always been a huge part of Linda Livingstone's life.
My dad was a college basketball coach that we were around sports all the time. And so my brothers and I would play basketball in the gym, and we got yelled at a few times for making too much noise during practice, and then played a lot of basketball on the driveway with my brothers.
President Livingstone is a dynamic leader, both here at Baylor and in the Big 12 Conference. A Christian, a mother, a daughter, a strong advocate for women in sports, and is proud to be Baylor University's 15th president. Welcome to the Sic Em Podcast. Great to have some time to sit down with you.
Happy to do it, John.
Busy
Looking
time.
forward to it.
Thanks for your time. It's busy, but it's always busy, isn't it?
It is, and it's always great to start a new semester and kick off the new year with all the activities that go on in the spring.
Very fun. Let's go back into your past in Oklahoma. Was it Perkins, Oklahoma?
Perkins, Oklahoma,
where you
yes.
grew up? What was that like for you?
Well, it was a very small town, about 1,200 people. I had 58 people in my graduating class. And my dad was a basketball coach, but he farmed on the side for fun and for relaxation is what he said, although I don't know that most farmers would classify farming as relaxing. And so I grew up on a farm, too, with my two brothers and my mom and dad.
That's a lot of work, isn't it? I mean, if you grow up on a farm, you're working on a farm.
Yes, I've hauled hay and I've worked in the fields and fed the sheep and the cows. So I've done a lot of farm work.
Nice.
And it was a real motivator to go to college and do something else with my life.
That's great. How did sports work in at an early age for you?
Well, you can imagine, since my dad was a college basketball coach, that we were around sports all the time. And we moved to Stillwater. My dad went back to Oklahoma State to coach with Henry Iba, Mr. Iba, when we were very young. And so I really grew up as a young child in Gallagher Hall, which is now Gallagher Iba Arena. And so my brothers and I would play basketball in the gym, and we got yelled at a few times for making too much noise during practice. And then played a lot of basketball on the driveway with my brothers. So it was a part of everything we did. We went to the football games at Oklahoma State on Saturdays as a family. So that was just part of our life, going to sporting events at Stillwater.
Henry Iba, I mean, one of the icons in college basketball. Did you realize that? I mean, at that time, or being around him?
Well, when you're a small child, you don't notice that so much. But my dad played for him on their 1945 national championship basketball team, and then went back to coach with him. And he was really kind of a father figure for my dad. And so we thought of him more like that, although he was a little bit of a gruff gentleman. But here's a funny story about him. We'd go into his office after practice, Mr. Ibis, and he had a drawer he would pull out and he had those little miniature, like juicy fruit gum, pieces of gum, and he would give those to us. So we thought it was pretty cool, that we got to do that.
That's a great story. When Gene Iba was coaching here, Henry and Clarence, his brother Clarence, would come down every year at the start of practice. Do you remember that?
Well, because Gene was here for the first couple of years that I was here the first time. Yeah. So I do remember that. Yeah, a wonderful basketball family.
Yeah,
so.
Very fun. How about basketball for you? When did you start playing? What are your early recollections of that?
Well, besides just the fun stuff I did with my brothers, I think the first organized team I was on was like in 5th grade or something. Now kids start when they're like can barely walk, playing sports and stuff. But I was in a small town, so we started with school in 5th grade, and so then at the school I was at, again small school, we as a female athlete or female student, you could only play basketball or run track.
Oh, wow.
We didn't have any other sports. So that was all you did. You played basketball in the fall and winter, and then you ran track in the spring, and that was your only choices. So you pretty much did
I got you.
both of those things.
And apparently you were really good and got better growing up because you got a scholarship, right, to Oklahoma State.
Yeah, so I was fortunate to have a good high school career, and I actually walked on at Oklahoma State.
You
My
did?
first semester, I had an academic scholarship, got a scholarship at Christmas, so before the main part of the season started. But because I grew up near Stillwater, and my dad was coaching there when I was young. Interesting story. So when I was a senior in high school, towards the end of my senior years, I'd always planned to go to OSU regardless of whether I played basketball or not, because I'd grown up on the campus, loved OSU. My dad had retired by that point, and you probably know this being around coaches. Once you're a coach, you're always a coach.
Right.
And he was bored, and so he decided he wanted to coach again. And so he went and took the head women's basketball coaching job at the University of Oklahoma, our huge rivals, of course. And he had coached at OU's the men earlier in his career. And so he really wanted me to go play for him at OU. And because I'd grown up at OSU, I couldn't do it.
Right.
As much as I would have loved to have played for him in college. So actually, he only coached there a couple of years. So for my first 2 years at OSU, we played my dad's team at OU fairly regularly. And it was, in Oklahoma, which is a small state, it was quite an event when that would happen. Yeah.
I did not know that. That had to have been a tough choice for you.
It was very, very hard.
Yeah.
And it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, is to tell him I just couldn't go to OU and play for him. So, but, things work out for the best. And it turned out to be a good choice for me.
Very good. You're at Oklahoma State, and there's this tall guy on the men's team named Brad Livingstone. How did y'all first meet?
But the first time I ever saw Brad was actually when I was in high school. I had worked with, in the summers, with a young man who played for Stillwater High School, which is where Oklahoma State is. So my friends and I, we all worked together. We went and watched him play one night in our senior year in high school, and they happened to be playing Okmulgee, which is where Brad went to high school. And we happened to sit the row in front of Jim Killingsworth and a couple of his assistant coaches who were the Oklahoma State coaches at the time, and they were talking about Brad. They were there to watch Brad play, and so we could hear them talking about Brad and how they were thinking about how he could help the team. So it wasn't a particularly confidential conversation on their part.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I actually knew who he was. And then we were involved in Fellowship of Christian Athletes. We practiced before they did. And then, so we got to know each other at OSU through really Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and then because our practices were back to back. So
that's a great story.
Yeah.
Great connection at Oklahoma State. From there, post Oklahoma State, what was your career path that eventually led here to Baylor?
Well, it's kind of an interesting path. I certainly didn't know when I got out of college that I would someday be an academic and then be a university president. So straight out of, I finished my master's degree. I finished undergraduate early, so I started my master's degree in January of my senior year. So I did my MBA, and then Brad was finishing his bachelor's degree. And then when we graduated, we stayed an extra year for him to graduate, for me to finish my master's. He was going to go work for Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Western Oklahoma in Woodward. And so I was looking for job opportunities. I had several offers, but ultimately, because we were thinking about getting married, I took a job in Woodward as well, working for the county-wide recreation program. So my first job was running the county-wide recreation program in Woodward County, Oklahoma. And Brad was the director of FCA in the whole northwest region of Oklahoma. So we got married that fall after we graduated. And so I did that for a while, and then we moved to Enid, Oklahoma, which happened to be where my mom had grown up. It's for him to continue working for FCA. I worked for a hospital for a while. I was an accountant, and I hated it. Sorry, all the accountants out there, but it was not my thing. And so then we decided to go back to graduate school. So I went back to Oklahoma State, did my PhD in business administration. Brad got his master's because he wanted to teach. He loved FCA, but really wanted to have the impact you can have as a teacher and a coach. And so we went back to OSU and did graduate work, and again did it so I could be a faculty member and teach and research. And then ultimately my first faculty position was here at Baylor, and then it was through kind of some opportunities I had here at Baylor that I ultimately kind of got on that administrative track. Was associate dean for graduate programs here at Baylor, and then ultimately went to Pepperdine and then GW as dean of the business schools.
Right. And
then came back, of course, as president in 2017. So it's kind of an interesting pathway, but when you go to college, you don't ever really know
Sure.
where you're going to end up, but I've been blessed a lot and thrilled to be doing what I'm doing.
Good. What was the initial draw to Baylor, that first time or connection here?
Well, it was interesting because Oklahoma State and Baylor were not in the same conference at that time. We were in the Big Eight at Oklahoma State, of course, Southwest Conference for Baylor. We never played each other at all much at that time. And the reason Baylor kind of got on my radar screen, my advisor for my dissertation, Dr. Deborah Nelson at Oklahoma State, we were talking about schools I should be looking at as I got towards the end of my program. And she said, have you ever thought about going to Baylor? And I said, well, no, not really. I don't know much about it. And so we talked some about it. She goes, well, I know that you're a Christian, that your faith matters a lot to you. It's a faith-based institution. I think it'd be a really good place for you to go. And so it happened when I was finishing my doctoral degree up. It's a little bit random who happens to have the positions open
Sure.
in your field when you're looking for a job. And Baylor happened to have a position in my field. So I came and interviewed. And interviewed 5 or 6 places that year and ultimately got the offer at Baylor. So it was, my faculty member, sort of seeing something in me and connecting me with Baylor, and then it working out that Baylor had a position and a great opportunity. We were thrilled,
Yeah. And I'm sure the faith-based mission of Baylor that you carry on so well now, I'm sure that was a part of it initially also, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, I thought that would be it was a great fit with me personally and my values. And I'd grown up in public schools, obviously went to Oklahoma State, a public institution, which for a public institution, particularly then, had a really strong kind of faith component to it just because of where it's located. But I thought it would just be a really great opportunity to be at a place where the mission was directly tied to our faith component, and just a really great school. Now, Brad had told me when we started looking for jobs, he goes, Linda, I'll go anywhere but Texas. He didn't want to go where it was hotter than in Oklahoma.
Right.
So we learned very quickly to really not tell God what you are or not going to do,
Yeah, that's
because he will
right.
surprise you.
Yeah, and he meant the state of Texas.
Yes,
he
he
didn't
did
mean the University
well, he
of
probably
Texas.
meant that too,
Gotcha.
but I think he meant the whole
Just
state at the
clarifying
time.
there.
At this time, he meant the whole state.
That's great. And here you are in Texas.
That's right, back again in Texas.
Good. Was there ever, or when was the first thought that maybe you wanted to be in administration and maybe even a university president at some point?
Well, when I was at Baylor, fairly early on as a faculty member, Don Edwards, who was our department chair at the time, pulled me aside and he goes, Linda, you really ought to think about doing administration at some point. Now, usually you start up being a department chair or something. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'd always enjoyed the administrative kinds of things I'd done. And then I was asked to chair a committee with the graduate programs in the business school to revamp the entire graduate curriculum, the MBA curriculum. And so through that, then I had the opportunity to become the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs, and Terry Manus was the dean at the time and asked me to do that. And so that really started me on that path. It probably wasn't until I was at Pepperdine as dean of the business school that I really thought about being a university president. And people would tell me, you should think about this. But at that point, it's less so now. You usually had to become a provost, so a chief academic officer, before you became a president. It was really unusual to go straight to a presidency from being a business school dean. And I didn't really want to be a provost. I loved having a great provost. I love our provost here. Nancy Brickhouse is an amazing provost, and I'm so thankful for that. But I didn't really see that as my skill set or my giftedness. So I kind of, at some point, had felt like, well, maybe just being a dean is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to be a president because I'm really not going to go the route of being a provost, because I just don't think that's what I would be best at. And then after I went from Pepperdine to GW, then of course the position opened at Baylor, and for a lot of reasons, that ended up being a good and right opportunity and a good fit. So it was something I thought a little bit about, had people encouraging me about, but it wasn't something that I didn't apply for a bunch of presidencies or anything, because that's what I felt like I needed to do.
Good. Perfect fit is right. I've said this before. I've said this to you before, that I love to tell the story that I think it's right that you're the only former Division I student athlete that's the president, a female president of a major university. Are we still right?
I
in
think
that?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, the president that was at Ohio State for a few years had played lacrosse or something at Stanford for a while, but
Okay.
she's not president there. So I think that's pretty close to accurate, at least as best I can tell. So.
That's great. I'm going to keep telling that story
Well,
and telling
good.
it that way. How about, let's talk about athletics and academics and kind of your view of, we hear athletics is the front porch, to the university. As a former Division I student athlete, I know you see the benefit of athletics.
Yeah. Well, it certainly was deeply formative in my life, both because I came from a family that was very involved in athletics, obviously with a father that's a coach, but then as a student athlete in high school and then ultimately in college. And our daughter
Right.
is a student athlete, now a coach. So I see how formative it is, how impactful it can be in your life, and how it helped prepare me for what I do. And so certainly on a personal level for our student athletes, I recognize the transformative power it has for our student athletes to prepare them for life long after college and long after they are no longer competing athletically. But for a university, particularly at the level at which we compete in athletics, it really gives you a national platform that is extremely hard to have otherwise. We have amazing academic programs, amazing faculty, but when you're on national TV week in and week out with athletics, it gives you visibility and a way to tell your story on a national platform that it's really hard to get any other way. So that opens the door for people to know about Baylor, to ask about Baylor, to learn about us, and to want to come be a part of what we're doing, that it would be hard to get that visibility and to build that brand in other ways.
Good. And you mentioned Shelby,
Yes.
that role, parent of a student athlete. She played volleyball at Rice, coached here at Baylor, volleyball Final Four team in 2019, now into coaching full time. That's got to be fun for you to see.
It really is. And, again, it's God is the way he works. Shelby had sworn her entire life she was not going to be a coach. If you talked to her the day before she got the call about
Right.
the job at Liberty, she would have said, "Mom, I am not going to coach. You know that. Quit asking me that question." And yet this opportunity came along. She, of course, has a Master of Divinity, and she did the sport ministry track, wanted to work in ministry for college athletes. And I think she's learned that through coaching, you have as much opportunity to mentor, minister to, have impact on the lives of young people in ways it's really hard to any other way. So it is really great fun to watch. Most parents don't have the privilege of getting to watch their children work. We got to watch them play, but
Right.
you don't get to watch them work. And we get to do that, not as much as we would like, but it's a real privilege. And she loves it. The players there and their families just love her and the impact she's having.
Good. National Girls and Women in Sports Day is coming up. That's significant, and I think you have a unique perspective on sort of what that means.
Well, I am just a huge proponent of women and girls' participation in sport. Obviously, because of the impact it's had on my life, the impact I see it has on Shelby's, and then the impact she's having on her student athletes, and certainly want to advocate in every way I can for more and more opportunities and better opportunities for girls and women in sports, because it has such a significant impact on their lives and really transforms them in ways that very few other things can do.
Yeah, and sports like newer sports like acrobatics and tumbling.
Right.
That's one thing Fee Mulkey says is it just provides more opportunities for women, in athletics.
Well, it does, and acro and tumbling is a great example of that. And Fee, my goodness, she was a champion for that to
Right.
get it to be an NCAA sport. There's talk about flag football becoming potentially an emerging sport. So you love to see that because it gives more and more women opportunities to be able to compete, to be able to showcase their skills to a broader audience, and love that we have the opportunity to do that at Baylor.
And besides all of that, you and Brad are just fans, aren't you? I mean, you're there. I think you're at more sporting events than I am, and that's saying a lot.
There's no way we would ever compete with you on that.
No.
one, John.
I think you are, but it's so fun to see, and just the support, and you don't sit in your seats. And Brad certainly doesn't sit in his seat, does he?
He kind of stands out in the crowd when we're cheering
Yes,
on.
he does.
We love to watch our students perform, and whether that's athletics or theater or music, we are, especially obviously athletic fans because we participated in everything, but just to see students perform at their best and to have the talent that they do. And we love cheering on our teams. People ask us, like, what would you do for entertainment if you weren't the university president? And I said, well, we'd still do a lot of those same things. We'd still go to sporting events and theater and music because we love that. We love watching the students, and then to be able to cheer on our Bears as they compete really at the highest level against some of the best competition in the country is great fun.
Good. We've got great facilities here at Baylor, not just athletics, but great facilities all over campus. But in athletics, the new Foster Pavilion has just opened, and then the Herd Welcome Center right there, catty corner to Foster. Gosh, what great new facilities those are.
Well, they're spectacular, and they frankly just change our ability to have an impact in the community and change the experience that people have when they come to Baylor. We're so grateful to Paula and Mark Hurd and for their contribution to the Hurd Center. It's transforming the way we welcome prospective students to campus, the way we welcome alumni back. If folks haven't been there, they absolutely need to visit. It is truly an experience. And then the Foster Pavilion, of course, Paula and Alejandra Foster have been such generous contributors in so many ways for years on this campus. And it's truly a fan-friendly facility. It's a great home court advantage. I think we've already seen that have an impact, even in the few weeks it's been open. So again, folks really need to come out and enjoy that. Women's games, men's games, they're all great and exciting and great competition. Best basketball league in the country.
That's right. Men's and women's.
Yes.
Really
tough
good.
This year. Really tough.
Very much. And then a new one coming or in progress on the athletic side is the Fudge Football Development Center. That's going to be a great addition.
Well, it will be. And it will really bring our football support facilities up to the level of really the best in the country. And it also, the other great thing about it, in addition to all it's going to do for our football program, it frees up so much space in kind of the Hires complex for all of our other sports. And so it will benefit really almost every single student athlete on our campus to add that facility and add more space for support for our student athletes.
So your job as president of Baylor University is very time-consuming. We talked about that. But in your spare time, you're on the NCAA Transformation Committee, member of the NCAA Board of Governors. How much time does that entail?
Well, it kind of comes and goes, but
Right.
They certainly have taken reasonable amounts of time. But they're really important. One, to college athletics broadly, but certainly to Baylor more particularly. And so it's really been a privilege to have the opportunity to serve in that way on behalf of Baylor and then the Big 12 Conference. I'm really in those positions because of my role in the Big 12 Conference on the board. And it's a chaotic, transformational time in college athletics. And so to have the opportunity to have a seat at the table, to be involved in trying to find a pathway forward for college athletics that maintains the integrity of our student athletes as students and to continue to emphasize the importance of them getting a college degree while finding more significant ways to support them, to benefit them. It's just a good opportunity for Baylor to be one of the key players in trying to find that pathway forward. Yeah.
Well, it's a real credit to you and a real plus for Baylor that you're on those committees, especially at this time.
Yeah.
Gosh, think about how different college athletics are right now compared to when you were playing at Oklahoma State.
It's just night and day. One, just separate from all the external influences, the athletes are so much better. It's a much more sophisticated game. The services we wrap around our student athletes to help them to be successful have improved dramatically. And then obviously part of the reason we're dealing with all the issues we are, the national attention, the media attention on college athletics has grown dramatically, which means there's a lot more money in the system around athletics because people love to watch college athletics. And so that has led us to have to rethink, how we do some things, how we support our student athletes. And I think we're going to be much better in the long run, but we obviously need to continue to look at how do we support them as students as well.
So you are the chairman for the board of directors for the Big 12 Conference. You were on the search committee that identified and brought Brett Yormark to the Big 12 as commissioner. Great job. Gosh, what a great hire. What a go-getter he is.
Well, thank you for that. that, it's interesting because what you need in a conference commissioner now is not the same thing you needed in a conference commissioner 5 or 10 years ago. And so when we went out after Bob Bowlesby announced his retirement, he had helped us bring in the 4 schools that started this year. But we knew as he retired and as we looked at the landscape of college athletics and how much it was changing, that we probably needed a different model for a new commissioner. And we needed somebody to be aggressive, help us rethink how we branded ourselves, how we thought about generating revenue, how we thought about the makeup of the conference. And so Brett rose to the top of the pool, and so we're excited to have him. He certainly has had a transformational impact and is a very aggressive go-getter, as everyone knows. So
another expansion coming next year with 4 more schools coming in next year. Boy, this is just an really interesting time, isn't it, in the Big 12?
Well, it is, and we're unbelievably excited about Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado coming in. They're going to strengthen the conference even more. I'm not even sure how you can get tougher as a basketball conference, but we will next year. It's such an uncertain time, and so I think part of what you have to think about as a conference is how do you position yourself, not just for now and how we can be successful now, but how are you positioning yourself for the future in such an uncertain environment to try to maintain your strength and integrity as a conference as the environment continues to change, not knowing exactly what that's going to look like. And so that's certainly what we're trying to do and what Brett's trying to lead us to do.
Yeah, you have to be ready to move, ready to advance, just be in the position to transition however you need these days.
Well, you do. You have to be very nimble, and you want to try not to be reacting to things. You want to try to be as proactive as you can in positioning yourselves, which can be challenging when you don't know exactly what's going to go on. But given what's happened at the Pac-12, the uncertainty in the ACC right now, you can't rest on your laurels. You've got to really be looking forward and pushing forward to maintain your integrity and strength as a conference.
Good. Final thought, many years down the road, when you decide to step down as president of Baylor University, how would you like to be remembered?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. When I think about kind of my time as president, I certainly hope that when people look at it, both while I'm here and then after I'm gone, that the university is a stronger, better place for the work that we did while I was here. And I mean that in terms of our Christian mission, in terms of our academic mission, in terms of our kind of financial underpinnings and infrastructures and institution, so that we had a really transformational impact on certainly our students, but also our faculty and staff. But it's not just about what happened while I was here. We talk a lot on my President's Council about the decisions we make today, the problems we solve today, and the problems we don't create today, set up future presidents, future faculty and staff to be successful. And so that what we do now needs to be done in a way that thinks about the impact it's going to have on generations of students to come. So hopefully people will look at the time, my presidency, and recognize the impact it's had, not just on our students, but to set up the university for a long-term successful future.
You're doing that every day. Thanks for that.
Thank you for saying that.
And thanks for the visit. We appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks again for joining us on the Sic Em Podcast, a sport and story production. If you enjoyed this conversation with President Linda Livingstone, head over to BaylorPlus.com where you can watch the premium video version of this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave a review, and tell your friends about us. I'm your host, John Morris, and I hope you'll join me next week on another edition of the Sic Em Podcast.